What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe.
And Amy.
Review. It's our weekly show where we review the magic stories as they're posted on Wizard's website. We are still in Dominaria, and for the first time ever, you are getting a second day in a row JaAR, because we had 2 stories released over 2 days. So today we are covering Return to Dominaria, Episode 2, once again, by Martha Wells.
Yeah, first and only time that we've ever done this, guys.
It's true. We have done 2 stories in one video before,
right,
but this is the first time of 2 days in a row. So, congrats. Welcome to history, I guess. Anyway, so my quick review at the top of this one, great. Still quite informative, just like yesterday's, just like the last one. There are many more to come, so I'm sure that, this was a little bit more action-packed. There was a little bit more emotion involved in this one. I liked it a lot. I think it did a good job of threading together a lot of old stuff while also not leaving newer readers, in my estimation, out in the dust. I am not one of those new readers, but in trying to put myself in that headspace, it felt that way. So my quick review is definitely worth your time. So, I don't know if you agree or disagree.
My quick review is that, I don't know, I think it's really good. I definitely have some qualms, though. So
really? Okay, interesting.
As we get, down the list,
yeah, let's do it.
I'll...
Okay. So, yes, but go, if you have not done it yet, go read the story, then come back here, listen to our review, talk with us.
You say that every time.
Yeah, it's true.
Still just as worth it to read the story first,
yes,
before listening to our opinions. Because
yes,
we don't want our opinions to influence your opinion. We just want a sort of back and forth to happen.
That's true.
We just want your thoughts to kind of be separate from ours, and you can kind of compare and contrast.
Very good. Exactly. And so for this story, we had Liliana and Gideon. So we start this one the same way that we ended the last one, but this time it's not Roman numeral 1, 2, and 3, where we kind of had hints at other things. This was entirely Liliana and or Gideon's perspectives, start to finish. I think that's fine. I had no problems with that whatsoever. We continued on with what we learned in the previous story, with Liliana searching for information on her brother Josu being in the area, and
on her parents as well, and I suppose her other siblings, which I didn't realize.
Sisters, her other sisters, yes. And she was able to, she sought out the Raven Man, because this is the area where she first met the Raven Man. He was the one who kind of led her to do those things and experiment in that way, which is then what led her to these issues with her brother.
Yeah.
So there you go. She finally sees the Raven Man. She confronts him, she talks to him a bit, and then tries to attack him as he kind of disappears into a puff of ravens, if you will. He was physically there. Now, whether he actually was or whether he just was manifesting himself is unclear, because
we don't really know who or what he is technically.
Correct.
So it's a little hard to know whether he's just kind of appearing to her or actually there.
Well, just because we know that he is at least projecting his thoughts and influence into her, even on other planes. So,
right.
And they dropped a little hint in the story where they were like, he could be a powerful planeswalker, or he could be an elder dragon, or whatever they said.
Yeah.
Like, just giving you little ideas of who he might be. That is definitely a big question in the Vorthos community.
Yeah.
Some would believe, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing, but some would believe that question has already been answered by someone who has done a lot of research. Go look it up, because it's definitely an interesting read and worth your time. But I'm not sure.
There are quite a few theories out there.
Yes, but nothing has been confirmed yet, and I think this was just a tease as to we're probably going to find this out, because we the writers and the creative team, we know that you care. We're getting there. I think that was their way of just being like, by the way, and like just dropping that little bit of a hint there for everyone that we get it. We're coming. So then she kind of, she being Liliana, kind of works out Belzenloc's plan. And she realizes that she's going to need the power of the chain veil to turn Josu from being this lich that Belzenloc made him to be into a corpse again and or her brother. It was just, she called it the ritual of unmaking, which it reminded you and I both of the same thing.
Right. I mean, well, what reminded me of Avacyn was the fact that they mentioned, or that Liliana mentioned wanting to go back to Vest Manor in order to unmake Josu because it was the place he was made, I guess.
Well, the place that he was turned, at least in the
Right.
first place, yeah.
And so it made me think of Avacyn and Soren and where Avacyn's unmaking took place. And I said, is that where Avacyn was made then?
I don't believe so. It was in a church. I think it just happened to be that that's where Avacyn was confronting Jace and Tamio, and Soren showed up and was like, all right, well, this is...
It's just, to me, this seems like a little bit of inconsistency from...
Well, we don't know necessarily if it's the same thing, although I think that the use of the same word is an interesting parallel in that it seems it feels related, but I don't know in what way, if at all, it could be related. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I don't know. From my standpoint, that was a maybe a continuity conflict a bit.
Okay.
From story to story or set to set or author to author or
Well,
whatever it was.
But there was also no explanation from Liliana as to why. I don't think she necessarily said that was the only place that she could do it. I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether...
sure she did.
I'm not sure whether she wanted to do it because...
She's like, that's the only way it'll work. And I'm like...
I don't know.
Is it though?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, obviously there was the necromantic energy there previously, because as Liliana said, that's where Josu was made into the Lich by Belzenloc. It's also where... Well, okay, so maybe this is why, because if you recall in the story, it said that the chain veil was feeding off of the necromantic energies that were in the area, which then caused the second half of the manor to collapse and all this other stuff. So maybe in no other area would there have been such a concentration of necromantic energy for the chain veil to feed off of.
That's a fine enough explanation. I just wish the explanation had been given in the story.
I gotcha. Yeah, I mean that explanation was literally something I just came up with literally while we were sitting here talking about it. So I don't know. It feels logical to me, but it's also magic, right? So then I don't mean Magic the Gathering. I mean magical influence. So I don't think you can apply rationale and logic to that because it's I don't know. It's somewhat irrational. In other words, I don't understand the logic of magic because I don't understand the bounds of magic, because that's just kind of the essence of it. But that's my proposal for what it could be. I don't know. But Liliana mentions the fact that she thought that it was an interesting plan by Belzenloc to use the power of the chain veil to turn Josu or unmake Josu, but that it would weaken her so much that she felt like she would then not have enough power to confront Belzenloc. We find out later from Gideon that Gideon's like, all right, well, whatever, we'll just have to figure something else out. And I liked that, because it was kind of Gideon being like, whatever, this is family stuff, you do what you got to do, and I will be there to support you, and we'll figure out what we have to do, because we got to find a way to beat Nicol Bolas, and if you need to beat your final demon for that, then we're gonna find a way to beat your final demon first. It just needs to be done.
I don't feel like that's what happened. I don't know. After that part, I was like, okay, they just didn't want this story to go on for too long, I guess, because it really just seemed like, oh, you're saying that we need to do this thing? Oh, you're saying that, you're gonna be powerless when we go to fight Belzenluck? Okay, well, whatever, we'll figure it out. It's like, no, this is kind of important. You probably need to find out some information. You probably need to plan. You probably need to figure out a timeline. You probably need to, like, not just go and save her brother just in case that is the thing that brings on Belzenluck's interaction with you when you aren't prepared to fight him.
Okay.
Like, you need to wait, figure stuff out, and so it really just seems like everybody's pulling a Chandra all the time. Like, everybody just decided, oh, let's go fight Bolus, even though a guy who literally fought him alongside someone else who died, basically, is telling us not to. We'll just do it anyway, even though he's supposed to be our friend. So you'd think that maybe we would try to trust him, or at least, like, ask him for some better details as to why we shouldn't go and what needs to be done first, which I feel like they really didn't do either. So I feel like they really jumped into trying to fight Bolus, and then right after that, they didn't learn their lesson. They're just now trying to jump into fighting Belzenluck.
And they're down 3 people.
Right. It doesn't make sense.
Interesting. It's funny that you mentioned that you felt like they kind of rushed through that part or glossed over it, because I felt that way, but about a different part of the story.
Oh, okay.
I thought it was very interesting that Liliana was healing Gideon at the beginning, and she kind of, as like an aside, says, oh my God, there was a moment where I felt like I might have transformed him, my only ally, like I did my brother, in attempting to heal him. I feel like that should be a kind of a big deal. You've mentioned multiple times that this is your only ally now against your final demon, that I don't think at that point had determined that she would need to utilize the power of the Chain Veil and wouldn't have it against Belzenluck. I don't recall the exact sequencing, but that she commented, she was like, oh, what if I turn Gideon the same way I turned my brother? That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Because her brother is just her brother, but Gideon is a powerful planeswalker, and again, her only ally.
Right.
And so that should have been a much bigger deal of, like, her contemplating, do I do this? Is this the right decision?
Right.
I need him, but is it worth the
or
risk?
Asking for help from, just people around. Like, go and find another healer and ask for advice, or take him to that other healer, or, ask the other healer to come back with you.
Yeah.
Just so that you have some supervision here to actually make it seem realistic, because like you said, it's a problem that you have with the story, because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't feel real, because if you ran through that in your head in real life, your response would not just be to, okay, well, yeah, it sucks that I'm thinking about this, but I just gotta keep going.
Yeah, press on. Well, okay, and so combined with that, I mean, I thought, she could go try to find out more information about the transformation, but I will say that I thought that part of the story was a little bit unclear, because there were discussions in her head of her being somewhat childlike. Like, she kind of brought herself back to when she was younger and had done this with her brother before she sparked. And, excuse me, that kind of led me to question then at that point what part of her was thinking that way of, oh my God, could I turn him the same way I turned Josu? Was it her younger self, like her flashing back to her younger thoughts? Or was that present adult Liliana thinking that way? Or was it both? Because if it was her younger self, then she could go, whatever, I'm older now, I'm smarter, and then go along with it. But I don't think that was very clear. And I think that this story with that section, as well as towards the end, is trying to show, and hopefully doing it well, at least so far I've seen, they're trying to show Liliana's now new evolution as a character. she is becoming more likable, if you will, or more relatable as a character, as opposed to just smug indifference.
Right.
Now she is vulnerable, and she's allowing people to see that vulnerability. At this point, more specifically, Gideon.
Right.
The only person really, I mean, I guess Nissa doesn't really get her or like her, and we saw that come out pretty obviously yesterday's episode. But now we're seeing this change in Liliana, and I was a little curious as to, whether it's just a flat shift now, and now we're just with lighter, softer, nicer Liliana, or is it kind of an ebb and a flow? So you're going to see arrogance, humbleness, and then somewhere in between bouncing over and over again until we kind of get the culmination of Liliana's character arc for Dominaria, because that's kind of a big deal. And it was, for me, like I said, that part was a little bit confusing. It raised a couple of questions for me that I don't feel like, I can understand being a little bit cagey because you want to up the mystery factor, and like we were talking about yesterday, you want people to be interested in continuing to come back and learn more and more. But I feel like that one was unclear not on purpose, as opposed to unclear on purpose to try to be mysterious in some way.
Yeah, I feel similarly. I think that this is gonna sound mean, but I think that throughout this story, the mindset that Liliana had was vague. And I think when it didn't necessarily feel super vague, it just felt slightly vague. It felt incorrect. It felt, very different from what you'd expect Liliana's reactions to things to be. And I understand if, like you said, there's a clear shift now in her personality. I get that. I just wish that I had seen the transformation. I just wish I had seen the trip from A to B instead of just seeing point A and seeing point B, and all of a sudden you're just at point B now when you were just at point A.
Well,
and that travel time was just missing because there was no way for us to see what was happening in her head to get her to that point, really.
Well, that's why I said I'm not sure whether it is truly she's just at point B now and she'll be there no matter what. I think it could be kind of a fluctuating situation where she'll be back and forth between the two.
And that's fine. It's such a far distance between the two that it feels like poor characterization.
Well, we'll have to see. We still have
it go straight from one to the other.
We still have 9 or 10 more episodes to go, and so we will be keeping our eye on that in the coming weeks to make sure that, to see how that through line works out. And does it become more clear? Are we just at point B now, and then we can just look back at this one and say, oh, okay, so this was the turning point, we just didn't notice it at the exact moment? We'll have to see.
We noticed the turning point. It's just that the turning point is a point. There's no
crescendo kind of thing.
Right. There's no events that lead you to that point.
I got
It's
you.
just the point.
Okay. There was mention of Rael the Angel. They go to recruit her. She did not play a major role at all in this story, so I have to suspect that she'll be back again, because otherwise that was, in my opinion, just a waste of the introduction of this angel and her group of warriors or whatever that had fought the Cabal. And Gideon, like, Liliana was like, oh, it's not going to work, and Gideon was like, you let me worry about that. I'll recruit these people. You just worry about what you got to do with your brother. And then Gideon held off the fighters, or the enemies with the fighters for, just so long. But I just thought it was interesting that with her introduction, she didn't do much in this story. So like I said, if we don't see more of her, I'll be a little surprised because there really wasn't much of a reason for her character to be introduced here.
Right. Except to kind of make it seem like they were actually starting to ask people for help so that they could understand things a little bit better. But I feel like that was very minimal. And like you said, it really felt like she didn't need to be there.
Right. Well,
so I think that either they should have gone more with the idea of them asking people on the plane for help, or they should have stayed away from it altogether. But I think they were kind of like here-ish.
Right. I mean,
and it felt weird.
They used her as exposition to inform her of the dread, I want to say this correctly, the dread shades and the skin witches.
Right.
Which was, I thought, really cool. I actually wrote that down. I liked the fact that we were given kind of in-depth descriptions of these two types of enemies, their abilities, what they do, what they are, how dangerous they are. That was cool. I appreciated that a lot, that they were fully, no pun intended, fully fleshed out enemies. Right? I mean, skin witches sound horrifying, and I didn't see any pictures. They showed the one picture of the dread shade. They did not show a picture of a skin witch, and I don't know that I want to see one, because it sounds pretty gross to me.
They did a great job of describing it, so I don't think we need to see one.
Exactly. So there was that. I thought that was cool. So the other thing is, we've talked about this a lot in stories in the past, whether it be with Brazella, whether it be with the Eternal Minotaur, whose name I'm now not going to remember, but I'm sure you do. He was an Amonkhet card as just a regular Minotaur, and then in Hour of Devastation, he was the Eternal version of himself, Neheb. That's who it was. Neheb the Worthy, and then Neheb the Eternal. There were fights with both of those characters, and they kind of got killed pretty quickly and anticlimactically, despite the fact that there was a lot of build, especially with Brazella. I mean, it was Bruna and Gisela that fused together into this gross mass of... I love that art. It's like one of my favorite arts ever.
I hate it.
Amy hates it and thinks it's grotesque and awful. I love it because of those exact same reasons. But Brazella was kind of killed off pretty quickly by Thalia and Sigarda, and Neheb was kind of glossed over in the fighting in the streets of Amonkhet, or in the streets of Noctamen, with Jeru and Samut kind of fighting back and forth. God, why do we as Vorthos have all these names just floating around in our heads?
I mean, I don't. That's why I always ask you what they are.
But anyway,
I don't remember any of them.
It would have been nice if I had written this down. No, just going off the top of the head. So, but those two characters were two that I could recall that we discussed about, like, okay, these are kind of a big deal as characters, and you see them, and then they're gone. Right. And I don't know whether Josu should fall into that category or not, but if you feel like he does, then Josu got the Brazella treatment in this story, because sure, he got to talk and he got to say what he was going to say, but there was no action whatsoever except Liliana backed up. He was really fast. He appeared like right in front of her, and then she pulled out the chain veil and he fell to the ground.
Yeah.
Right? She fell to the ground, and right in front of her was his body just lying there because she had succeeded by just basically touching the chain veil.
Yeah.
Which is fine, again, because I think an argument could be made that Azor was treated the same way, but my excuse for Azor, if you missed that episode where we discussed that, my excuse for Azor was that it was to show us the strength that Jace had gained, or the mental prowess that Jace had gained in dealing with his telepathy and his telepathic powers, because...
Well, and getting all his memories back.
Correct. His memories of his abilities.
Already had. Yes. You just didn't know he had them.
Yes. And so that was to show us even this big, powerful character that used to be a planeswalker is no match for Jace. Jace just shuts him down like nothing. And I thought that made sense.
And he's like ancient.
Yes.
You know, he's been around.
I mean, he gave up his spark, so he's not as powerful, and the mending still happened.
Right.
But yes,
still,
correct.
He was around a good long time.
Yes.
To like figure out how to beat a little mage.
Yes. But Jace is
mage.
But Jace is very powerful. And that, I think, that was meant to show us that in that exchange. Now, we had Liliana with a power that we have seen her have for a while.
Yeah.
There's nothing new here. But she was able to just do it like that. And so my question is, you know, I don't know. My question is maybe to all of you. Do you feel like Josu got shafted here? Or do you feel like it made narrative sense for Josu to have fallen that quickly because, hey, it's the chain veil, it was really only there to... Her using it in this way was really only there to build suspense for the Bells and Lock fight, to be like, oh my god, she doesn't have the chain veil anymore, she's weakened, how is she gonna... Or the power of the chain veil, not that she lost the chain veil, but that she can't utilize it because she's so weakened by it. So how is she going to beat Bells and Lock now? I'm curious. I'm curious what all of you think. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
I mean, what I'm curious about is... Well, I don't know. I'm not curious about anything at this point. I think this story should have been 2 stories.
Really?
And it's gonna sound really much, you know, a lot... It's gonna sound very contrary to what I normally say, but I think that this should have been 2 stories, and they should have developed each of those stories with a lot more characterization, a lot more description.
Okay.
And given everything the time it deserved.
Okay.
And I don't feel like the story did that, because I feel like I almost feel like it was kind of just a list of events instead of a story where meaningful things happened to cause other meaningful things.
Okay.
I feel like we just skipped right to the meat and potatoes without an appetizer, and it didn't work because we were expecting, you know, a 5-course meal.
Interesting. Like I said, I'm very curious what other people think as well, because are we totally off base, you know, or do you agree with us? And did you agree with us before we said it, or did we kind of clue you into something and you just agree now? 2 last things. One that I found interesting was I liked the introduction, and I say introduction, it's the first time I'm hearing of it, but I like the dementia magic. I think that was really cool. I think that in this story, the dementia magic was used most prominently to show Gideon looking at some of his irregulars as zombified people, and then he kind of realizes what's going on, and he's like, no, it's not real, shake it off, Gideon, that's not what it is. That was really cool. And then Liliana kind of seeing Josu look more like himself. And she also acknowledges, like, nope, that's not what that is, this is dementia magic, shake it off. Like, that's so cool, because it creates the possibility. I mean, you see this in movies and television shows a lot, where you will see something and someone will die or something horrific will happen, and you'll be like, oh my god, I can't believe they killed off that character, or I can't believe that they let that person get shot or something like that. And then you'll find out that it was just a hallucination. And now that option is available where you can amp up the suspense and the emotion, only to find out that it was just dementia magic messing with your head or messing with the characters' heads and minds there. That can create such an opening for many, many interesting things to happen.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'll go on with it or not, but I think they should. I think that's really cool. And maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I really liked that magic type being introduced. I think that was really cool.
Yeah, definitely.
And then the last thing, to kind of circle back to the Liliana personality shift, and that we saw a lot of kind of muted trust building between Liliana and Gideon in this story. Because Liliana goes to Gideon and she's like, look, here's what we have to do. I have to use the chain veil on Josu. He's my brother. You know, and like she hesitantly is like, he's my brother. Because she is probably afraid that he's going to turn around and be like, your brother? Talk to me about him. You know, and she doesn't want to talk about her family. But she doesn't necessarily even realize Gideon's probably somewhat able to pick up on that enough to not be like, your brother? You have a brother? Tell me about your brother. What was his name? What was he like? You know, what about your father and your mother?
That's much more of a Jace thing than a Gideon thing.
Or a Chandra, like if she's like naive and like, please tell me. But yes, either one of those.
But
and
Gideon's much more stoic.
Yes.
And I think that that's going to help in their relationship, because I think she will realize that he's not going to pry. The information that she's willing to give or feels she has to give will be the extent of it until she's willing to give more later. Because he understands that she's not willing to give it.
And he's being very tactical and goal oriented right now, because I think, like us, he realizes that there's only 2 of them now. There were 5 in that last fight, and it was tough against Razaketh. It was not easy even with 5 of them, and now there's only 2, and then he finds out that there's no chain veil. So he's probably trying to, again, be the tactician here and say, all right, we're going to figure this out, but we got to work at it now. And so all this extraneous stuff, maybe he'll ask her about it later, but for now they have a mission and they're going to complete it, and he's the general. So he's going to focus on completing that mission over anything else at first, despite the fact that even when Josu at the end, or towards the end, is chastising Liliana and saying that it's her fault that the mom died, or that the dad died and the mom went off and with the sisters looking for her and they all died, and that's all Liliana's fault, and that she is the curse of Vess as opposed to anything else. That Gideon heard some of that towards the end. And he even came up and, like, again, he didn't mention it. He just moved on because they have stuff to do, right? And so he's not going to harp on it.
Laser focused at this point.
But as a tactician, I'm sure that he is aware of it. It's in the back of his mind, and he now knows that for the future.
For when he needs it, because he will.
Yes. And so, all of that being said, again, I still think I liked the story. This one brought up a lot more questions, but not the kind where we're like, oh my god, I can't wait till next week to find out the answers. More of this feels like it was supposed to have been better explained and it wasn't. As with anything, because this is a serial kind of thing and it's episodic, if we are corrected in the future, we can be like, oh, okay, cool. So they left it open on purpose, and now we're here and we have the answer. And we are always more than happy to be proven wrong. These are just our opinions, our obviously initial reactions. Please give us yours as well. Tell us what you thought of our opinions of the story itself. Again, were we off base? Did you agree with us? Do you now agree with us? Do you now disagree? Whatever. There's a myriad of things that you could say.
I feel like the story was a little bit on fast forward. I think that it needed a lot more development, that it was missing. But maybe they will do something like that. You know, maybe they'll end up making later stories kind of place you in the center of this one and draw it out longer and show you more things that happened in the interim. Because
I suspect with the end of this story being what it was, I don't assume that next week is traveling to where Belzenlock is and or fighting Belzenlock. I feel like next week we're going to be getting a little bit more of non-Gatewatch characters. That's my suspicion. I don't know that, but that's my guess, because I feel like there were 2 stories 2 days in a row, and I feel like if they were supposed to have been separated 1 week after the other, but they pushed the first one back because of leak issues, I think that it makes sense to put 2 similar storylined stories focusing on the same basic characters, one right after the other, and then put the different one next week.
Right.
So that's my suspicions, my educated guess, if you will, as to what we're going to be dealing with, especially because I feel like now that we've gotten kind of 1.5 to 1 3/4 stories worth of Liliana and Gideon, I feel like they're now going to move on to something else.
Perhaps.
And we'll see what we get next week with that. Will it be Karn, Teferi, Joyra, the Weatherlight, Jaya, etc. There are a lot of directions we could go. We could go back to the Cabal, for instance, and hear from Belzenlach himself, or more of Sadaj or whatever. We've got lots of places to go. Like I said, 9 to 10 more of these left. So we will be back next week now, not tomorrow, next week. We love you, but we don't want to be back here every day.
I'm hoping that they don't put out another story tomorrow.
No, they would have announced it, and they didn't. So,
Yes.
But anyway, we will be back next week. We hope that you all enjoy your weekend and the rest of your week and etc. Thank you guys so much for watching and for interacting with us. With us. Yeah.
With us.
I'm so tired. Anyway, thanks for interacting with us. Syllables in the comments down below. And continuing to show off your...
Hashtag Vorthos Pride.
Yes, you talk, because I clearly can't. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been another episode of JaAR here on Geek for All. I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, guys, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.